rule number one, reinventing the wheel. Can you talk us through this? What are you seeing people doing wrong? Explain the rule in a little bit more detail. Where do we go with this?
Reinventing the wheel is trying to get out there and learn it all yourself without paying a little bit of money to learn from other people.
Okay.
Why would you go and spend the time and make the mistakes and lose tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars you don't have to if you don't need to reinvent the wheel? There's a passage in the Bible that says there's nothing new under the sun. And that means that just about every way you can contemplate to invest in real estate, someone has done before successfully. And so my first rule is don't waste your time, don't waste your money. Spend a little bit of time, spend a little bit of money finding someone who has done what you hope to do, and then try and figure out a way to learn from them.
Every footy team's got a coach.
Well said. But often when it comes to investing, I mean, you don't learn to invest like you learn to drive, do you? So you have a level of intuition, but the problem is that greed and emotion can get in the way of common sense. So if you can find an education program that's out there and the person who offers it isn't just a wealth creation shonk, someone who actually eats their own cooking, i.e. their program has been developed based on what they've done themselves rather than what they've heard other people talk about, then I would definitely be happy to invest in it. I mean, I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars myself buying programs and courses and attending seminars to learn how to be a professional investor. But I've made millions and millions of dollars out of real estate. So it's been a great return on that investment.
Can we rewind a little bit to Steve McKnight 20 odd years ago when you hadn't bought any property? Maybe you'd bought a PPR, something along those lines, but you were still fresh. You were green about this. We're talking what, mid 90s, late 90s, about that?
First property purchased in May 1999.
1999. Okay. How did you actually go about sorting the wheat from the chaff, so to speak? Because there are a lot of educators out there, some of them brilliant, some of them ridiculous. They'll just be happy to take your money. What did you do to start learning?
You know, no one's ever asked me that question, Todd. And it's a pretty good question to ask because I recall going to a lot of seminars in the early days before I'd even settled on investing in real estate. And there were clearly people who I wouldn't trust. And there were some people who looked like they could be trusted, who with the passage of time turned out to be untrustworthy. And then there were some people who I learned from who were also trustworthy and have become friends over time. So reading books, some of the books that were in existence back in the day, Jan Summers was a big real estate educator, popular
Classic.
on negative gearing. Noel Whittaker, Margaret Lomas in those early days had put some books out about real estate. Tracy Bell, I think, had a book about how to pay your mortgage off in no time at all. And then, of course, it was Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And a friend had given me Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it's still around today. You can go and buy it and read it. And then after reading that, I went to Robert's intro seminar when he was in Melbourne. And then I signed up to do his 2-day weekend. And then 2 or 3 weeks after doing that 2-day weekend, we bought our first investment property, a little $44,000 positive cash flow ex-commission home in Ballarat.
Okay, so started with books, started basically going, I'm going to look at everything first. By the sounds of things, kind of went with your gut feeling on who feels right, who doesn't feel right. And then the test of time really sorted that one out as far as a definite for you. And then ended up going with Robert, because Robert Kiyosaki, or Richard Kiyosaki, as Jared, our editor, likes to call him, Robert Kiyosaki.
Richard Kiyosaki. No, there's something important, Todd, to mention here, because there wasn't anything at Robert's seminar that was groundbreakingly different. What the point of difference was, there was a real estate agent from Sydney that got up and said, I don't know why people negatively gear when they can positively gear.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? What's this positive gearing thing? I knew all about negative gearing from my days being a chartered accountant and doing tax returns, but what's positive gearing? Oh, you can get someone paying you to put money in their pocket and get capital growth? Why didn't I know this? And rather than going and reading 5 more books or trying to find out a whole lot more information about it, what I wanted to go and do is to see if this concept could be applied in Melbourne, where I lived. And I went and looked around Melbourne. I spent hours trying to find a positive cash flow property. Couldn't find a single one. Got in the car, drove to Ballarat, spent a day looking back. No positive cash flow. I was like, these positive cash flow things are farce. And then towards the end, talking to a real estate agent, he said, "Oh, no, no, you won't find positive cash flow property in the nice suburbs. You'll find positive cash flow properties in the nasty suburbs."
Yeah,
I was
right.
like, "Oh, I don't know that I want to invest in the nasty suburbs." But
Yeah.
then we ended up buying a $44,000 property. Doesn't sound like much by today's standards, but
Mhm.
back in those days, that was in an area where angels feared to tread, but it was positive cash flow. And that was the first purchase, and onwards and upwards from there.
So to put that in perspective, what would Melbourne's median house price have been back then? Like what, 200,000, 300,000? What are we talking?
Yeah, between 200,000 for Far East, probably more, 300 to 400,000, sort of within 15 kilometres of town.
Okay. All right. So as much as 44,000 sounds like a joke by today's standards, percentage wise, there's still, would you feel equivalent kind of deals out there?
Well, I'm not sure because cheap is relative, but
Hmm.
what I'd say is that the numbers don't lie. And when interest rates went down to as low as they went to, a lot more property became positive cash flow, but now interest rates have started going back up again.
Hmm.
Those properties that were positive cash flow might now be negative cash flow. But remember this, right? Any property that's a rental property is positive cash flow. Huh? What do you mean?
Oh, yeah.
Well, so long as people are paying rent, you're going to cover the expenses. The question is the amount of money you borrow to buy it that could make the positive cash flow negative. And I've never been able to find properties where you could borrow 100% of the purchase price and it would be positive cash flow.
So you reckon that people need to take their LVRs into account more often than not because that you feel is like something is overlooked? If I've understood you right?
Well, the problem is if you borrow more than 80%, you're eventually going to run out of borrowing capacity. And
Hmm.
so the amount of real estate you can own is finite. Whereas what I did is I always borrowed 80% or less, used multiple trust structures so that I could tap into more or less unlimited finance, and bought positive cash flow properties that paid off the loan. Because if I had bought negative cash flow properties, then again, ultimately my borrowing ability would have been capped. But in order to buy 130 properties in 3.5 years, we had to build a system that was sustainable and scalable.
Now, if
And
you're
that required positive cash flow.
sorry to jump in there, Steve. I thought you'd finished, but if you're new to real estate, I want you to hit that rewind 30 seconds and listen to what Steve just said again, because packed in that, like, yeah, 30 odd seconds is absolute property investing gold, because so many people right now, I don't think understand this. And like, if you buy negatively geared properties and it works for you, great, that's wonderful. But there's a different sort of ceiling that you're going to end up reaching. And that comment was just said so casually, but there is so much, like, so much truth and so much that could really help people grow in that, I feel. But Steve, I feel like this kind of ties itself perfectly to the next rule of time misallocation, because one thing that you said that really stuck out to me was you didn't start reading other books after you'd found this out. You were like, okay, well, how do I put this into practice? How do I do this? And I can see some people though, and it kind of goes into the procrastination rule, but kind of going, well, actually, no, let's do a little bit more research. A little bit more research, totally understand. But if you then fall down that research rabbit hole and go into analysis paralysis and never do anything, is that what you mean by time misallocation? Or are you talking about more, I've got a goal of being a property millionaire, but I spend every evening at the pub?
Hopefully not. There's only so far that'll get you. Although I have spent a few evenings at the pub when we were renovating a property in Ballarat, which was perhaps my biggest investing mistake because I spent so much time trying to save money painting rather than being out there looking for great deals that would make money.
Okay.
We would often go up to the pub for a counter meal dinner, but that's a story for another day, maybe. No, this misallocation of time really has to do with the fact that people are focused on doing things that don't matter at the cost of things that do matter. And these days, the way I would explain that concept is to say, what do you do with your most productive time? And most people swap it for money, i.e., they've got employment where they have to go to work and they swap their best hours
Mm-hmm.
for the dollars that they use to fund their life and their lifestyle. Well, considering that everyone out there looking to buy real estate is competing against people like me and other professional investors who spend our productive time hunting for the really good deals, what kind of deals do you think you're going to find at 10 o'clock at night?
Mm.
What, you're going to scan the internet and find the great deal that no one else hasn't seen? How unrealistic is that? So, if you want your future to be different from your past, then you're going to have to potentially give up some of the income you might earn in that productive time to reallocate towards your investing. I was not able to go and find these positive cash flow deals while I worked full time as an accountant. I had to stop working full time as an accountant to open up the days to go and look for property when other people were at work. And so there's this misallocation of time that goes on in people's heads. They leave it too late to get started. Perhaps they're cursed by being too smart and feel like they've got to know everything about everything
Hmm.
before they jump in and start taking action. Or alternatively, they're so busy doing something else that they're really too busy to find good deals and make good deals in investing. So a saying that I've said over and over again, a bit of a Steveism, is, are you too busy not looking for deals? A mentor of mine, Stu Silver, had a really great saying, if you're not making offers, you're not making money. But how do you know how to make an offer on something if you're not out there looking for it? You're too busy learning how to ride the bike rather than getting on the bike and taking it for a spin. And yes, there's a risk you'll fall off, but the best way to learn to ride a bike is on the bike. The best thing you can do is learn how to do it for yourself. Find the deals and then differentiate between the good deals and the bad deals.
So, but what about, like, to dig deeper on what you're saying here, for people that maybe they're on a higher income and they don't have the time? Would you still say, like, no, you should be allocating time?
Well, again, I take the view of, how serious are you? Is your future what you're doing more of what you're doing now, or doing more of something else? And if you're someone who's too busy, go, look, I'm happy to pay 2 or 3 or 4% for someone else to find properties. At least write down the scope of what you're looking for. And remember, just because they find it doesn't absolve you of the need to do due diligence to make sure that the deal that they bring to you is a good one. Because often people are just out there scanning the same networks that you could be scanning, and you might pay tens of thousands of dollars for them to come and say, look, I found this deal. Where
Mm.
did you find it? Realestate.com or Real Commercial or somewhere. And it's like, well, I could have found that deal. It's just that I was too busy not looking for it.
Yeah. Okay. So even if you are going to use someone, if you are time poor, at least understand that when something is brought to you, you've got the nous to be able to go, yes, this is a good deal, I'm happy with this, or no, I'm not, instead of just having blind faith. So looking at the third rule then, Steve, we're looking for the perfect, no risk, everything's high profit, like just like the mecca sort of deal. How is this a rule? Can you explain how you've seen people go wrong with this and what they really need to bear in mind to get it right?
Absolutely. But before I give this answer, when does this pizza come? I've been promised pizza.
Mate, we actually did that on the very first episode and no one's actually heard it, because I'm not sure if we talked about this once before, and we actually got the pizza delivered to our guest's house, and then all you could hear during the interview was and it was like an ASMR video. Oh.
No, very good. Always good to get a gag. Look,
Mm.
the third rule about looking for the perfect, no risk, instant profit, surefire deal is, we're all looking for this magic fish in the pond.
Mhm.
And you have to believe me when I say I've bought hundreds of properties in Australia, in the United States, bought, I don't know, 50 or 60 in New Zealand, looked at buying property in Canada. I can't think of a single property I've ever bought that has just been a winner out of the gate without anything that's ever gone wrong with it. The actual act of investing is solving problems for profit. And what I find is that sometimes the assets that look the best are sometimes the worst, and the assets that look the worst are sometimes the best. Yeah. So what I would say to people is, it's like looking for your perfect partner in life. There is no perfect partner. The question is, can you live with what's wrong with it? And if the answer is yes, then so long as what's right with it outweighs what's wrong with it, well, why not go ahead? Let's look again, real life scenario.
Yep.
Remember that first property I mentioned, $44,000. Doesn't
Mhm.
sound like a lot by today's money, right?
Mhm.
But back in the day, $44,000 was all the money in the world to me. And I thought, oh my God, what happens if it all goes wrong and I lose the $44,000?
Mhm.
But the truth is, it wasn't $44,000 that was really at risk, was it? What was really at risk? If I had bought it for 44, maybe I would have paid 2 or 3 grand in stamp duty, and I might have paid another 2 or 3 grand in agents' fees. And let's say I had to take 10 grand off the price just to flog it to someone else in a hurry. So really, what I was risking was 10 grand plus 2 grand plus maybe 2 grand is 14 grand. But in my head, I'm thinking, oh my God, I might risk 44 grand. But then the question became, are you willing to risk 14 grand for the sake of being able to move ahead in life? And it was a no brainer. So being able to quantify the risk, name, number, and numb it, as I say, as risk mitigation strategies, is important to help you to overcome this screaming thing in your head that you might lose everything, when really you're unlikely to do that.
Mate, that's brilliant. So looking at something for what it truly is, opposed to just looking at the scariness that's in front of you, and actually, what is it? Name, number, and numb it. I like that. I feel that that's something that we could open up in itself. But really, looking for that perfect deal doesn't exist. And out of all of the properties that you've purchased, there's one sentence you said before. It's really solving problems for profit. So if you do have this perfect property, I'm doing air quotes now for anyone on Spotify or iTunes, then it's probably not the perfect one, because there's probably not enough problems to solve to really create that profit. Have I understood you right there?
So I'm going inspecting a property one day.
Yeah.
I love this story.
Yeah.
Brings back memories. And I go and knock on the door, and the tenant opens the door. The agent's there behind me. The agent steps back when the door opens. You always know something bad is going to happen.
Yeah.
If you're in that unfortunate situation. So I walk in, I'm talking to the tenant, and I'm looking around, and the floor is moving, and the wall is moving, and the ceiling's moving. And I'm trying to figure out what is going on. Am I like getting a migraine? Is there something wrong with my vision?
You're buying
And
a
there's
bouncy
this
castle?
god awful smell,
Yeah.
and it's like hard to breathe. And I'm looking around trying to find the source of this smell. And then I see there are cats everywhere. And then I look down, and
Wow.
there's this overflowing kitty litter tray of cat poo. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's where the smell's coming from. But what about all these moving things? And then as I slowly recognize what's going on, I feel something crawling up my leg. And it's tens of thousands of these tiny little German cockroaches.
How'd you know they were German?
Infesting this place.
How'd you know they were German? They're like, Achtung.
Well, I found out afterwards, because I wanted to know what they were. So this is in the United States when I was buying property in the United States, but this was a fourplex for sale for 40 grand.
Oh my God, that is
fourplex for 40 grand, right?
Yeah, okay.
And so just as I said this, the tenant says, oh, you probably see we've got a bit of a cockroach problem here. I'm like, really? I hadn't noticed. And she goes, yeah, I've been to hospital twice when they've crawled inside my ear.
Oh my.
My goodness, right? So what required, we had to get the tenant, I ended up buying it. We had to get the tenants out, right? We tried the cockroach bombs. They didn't work. There were too many cockroaches. We had to put a tent, this giant tent over the whole property, and put in these cockroach gas bombs to kill anything living inside the houses. I then re-tenanted them for massive positive cash flow profit, owned it for about 4 or 5 years, and then sold it, I think, for 250 or 300 grand.
That is insane, Steve. First of all, the story is just nuts in itself. And then that profit for after, what was it, 3 years, you said, 4 years?
I could write a book about all the crazy things that have happened over the course of buying hundreds of properties. Like, you name it, it's happened to me, and sometimes twice.
Okay. And so what I'm really taking from that and fitting into looking for the perfect deal, there is nothing perfect about that. If you had to just run straight out of the house, no one would have judged you for it. Everyone would have gone, yeah, okay, fair enough, Steve. I can see why you don't like having little German cockroaches crawling up your leg. But that was the opportunity.
I'm telling you, ugly houses pay better. It's just been my experience over 20 years. If you can buy something that's ugly and turn it into something that's pretty, whether it's the cash flow or the property, or add more perceived value than actual cost, and you can't go wrong.
I always used to brief agents with, the worse it smells, the more I'm interested. I felt that was an easy way to say it.
Got to be careful saying that, because I've been, I mean, it's generally been my experience as well, but I've been in some places where I've really felt I needed to scrub myself clean after being in there.
Yeah. Oh, the worst ones I've heard. We had a young lad on here a little while ago. His name escapes me at the moment, but he was doing a renovation, and there was that had holes in the walls, but they had used it as a bin for syringes. And when they took the gyprock off, about 500 syringes just went out. And it's like, there's not all the profit in the world that's worth the risk on that one for me. So careful is definitely the name of the game as well.
In the early days of my investing, we were buying ex-commission homes, and up in Ballarat, in the ex-commission area, there was a road called Violet Grove, which the locals used to call Violent Grove for good reason.
Okay.
So we're doing a house inspection with an agent, except he doesn't have keys to get in.
Yeah.
But the front window is broken. So we crawl through the front window,
as you do,
making sure we don't get slashed on the broken glass.
Yep.
And what is there before us is a crucified cat on the wall.
Oh my God. I was thinking that
that area was where angels feared to tread.
Steve, that is messed up.
I tell you, I have seen some messed up thing. I have actually been in a demon-possessed house, full on.
Did you buy it?
No, I drew the limit at that.
Okay.
I have to say, even I don't buy demon-possessed houses, but I'm not joking. That was a full-on demon-possessed house. That's a story for another day. I actually don't really like telling that story because it brings me back there, and
Oh yeah, I
not
can't
good.
imagine that would be a good place to be, mate. All right, well, I'm definitely not going to put the more crucified cats on the wall. The more I'm interested, I think I'm drawing the line there.
No,
But
no,
mate,
no, that was not good.
is there anything else that you'd like to wrap up with rule number 3 before we get on to rule number 4, mate?
Yeah, stop trying to find perfection. Doesn't exist.
Okay.
Can you live with what's wrong because it's less than what's right? And remember, if you buy problems and turn them into solutions, you usually make profit so long as you add more in perceived value than actual cost.
Have you got a book of quotes yet? Because if you don't, I feel that's the next one.
Steveisms. A mate of mine, Rainer, said, you have so many sayings, so many little
do.
pithy things. And I call them all Steveisms. And like I said, when you've been doing this for as long as I've been doing it and you've bought as much property as what I've bought, you just find themes and patterns in things that are wrong. And you know the themes and patterns of things that you're willing to take on because the return is greater than the risk. And you know the things that are just, be very wary of, like a property I'm looking at buying at the moment. I've detected that it's got an underground storage tank. And I'm really careful of underground storage tanks because I've bought properties with underground storage tanks before where there've been environmental concerns, and it's on you as the owner to fix them up. And so it can get very expensive very quickly. A property that we bought in the US fund that I ran, it turned out that it used to be an ice making factory before it was a hardware store, before it was a multi-tenant flex building. And because it was an ice making factory, apparently a lot of arsenic was used in ice making factories. Don't ask me why.
So,
but then there was soil contamination.
Sorry, just to clarify there, are we talking Breaking Bad ice or like ice you put in your drink ice?
No, ice cubes, I think.
Ice cubes, okay.
So, yeah, I have had my fair share of Breaking Bad experiences too, though, I should say. But the fix of that was that we had to do a whole lot of remediation to soil, and it cost 40 to 50 US $1,000.
Wow.
To get that done, and you don't get a penny of that back. That's just pure loss. So and then you're on environmental registers, and people who might want to buy it are wary, and lenders who might want to lend to them are wary, and it's just becomes very difficult to sell the property too.
Well, and 20 plus years of property investing experience behind you, I think this is a perfect segue into making sure that you're recognizing the difference between fact and opinion. You'd know a lot of different facts and be able to spot an opinion pretty damn quick. For anyone that's newer to property investing, could you open up this rule and maybe point us in the right direction of how people can better discern the difference between the two?
Well, this is one of my very first rules from right back in the early days, because there were lots of opinions about what makes a good property. But the difference between someone's opinion, particularly if they're being paid to give that opinion, and a fact, is the amount of due diligence you do to test the assumptions. And a lot of people don't know what to do, so they do nothing. And they believe that so long as the person that told me it is someone I trust, then it will be so. And it's not. So believe nothing, test everything is my mantra when it comes to due diligence, because what happens is the people that give you the opinions, and often the strongest opinion wins, tend to be the people who take 5 giant steps back when you ring them up afterwards and say, hey, there's this problem. They say, well, you should have done your own testing and figured that out. So when someone says something to you, try and work out whether it's a fact and it can be tested, or an opinion, which is someone's belief about what should be the case. And without wanting to get too crass, someone once said to me, opinions are like buttholes. Everyone has one and they all stink. And I've never forgotten that, and it's held me in good stead.
I grew up with that exact same saying, but it was about Commodores. Apparently Commodores are like buttholes.
I had a VC Commodore. That was a great car. Had it rusted out in the end, but it was a great car.
All right. So if someone says X, Y, Z, that's what you've got to do. From your perspective, it's not about going, yes, it's true, no, it's not, making up your mind that way. It's about going, all right, well, let's test this and let's look into X, Y, Z. Exactly. Okay.
Someone says to you, this is a great house. And you say, why? And they say, it's in a great area. And you're like, what makes it a great area? And they say, oh, because blah, blah, blah. And you're like, just believe it. Because the more things you believe, the greater the risk in the investment. Or do you go and test it and look for data that supports what you're being told? The more things you leave to chance, the more chance there is that things will go wrong, Remember that.
More things you leave to chance, the more chance there is things will go wrong. Okay. This Brooke, it's coming, Steve. I can feel it. Unfortunately, I can back up Steve's story with this as well. And I say unfortunately because as a former real estate agent, my job was to sell for the vendor. It wasn't to work in the best interest of the buyer. And there were so many times where sometimes it wasn't even about me saying X, Y, Z, this is so great. But I even just back up people's assumptions, and it would be like, oh, well, this is like 3 streets back from the beach. This has got to be a good investment. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. They're not making any more land 3 streets back from the beach. And you'd keep driving it home when, like, is it good to be close to the water? Sure it is. But is that like one isolated indicator that's going to make everything go boom? No, it's not. But as an agent, I would help point people in that direction, not just the beach one, but into the direction of like, this is really, really good. And you'd take an opinion and you'd kind of make it sound like a fact without lying. Well, at least that's how I did it. Maybe some people just like blatantly lie, but you'd make it sound so attractive that people would go, this is good. I feel comfortable with this. And I think that's personally what a lot of people would do is they'd seek that comfort. And what I'm really hearing from this, Steve, is don't seek the comfort from someone just saying something that's nice. Seek the comfort in the due diligence of pulling it all apart, knowing that you've pulled it apart so well to go, okay, no, that is right. Or that's complete BS. That's not on the agenda at all.
Never had an agent try and talk me out of a property they were trying to sell me.
They wouldn't be a very good agent if they did.
No, in the world of funds management, you have to tell people what all the risks are, and past performance is not a guarantee of future performance, and you really need to think about whether this is a good investment for you. But when you're buying real estate, it's buyer beware in every sense of the word.
Right, and leading us to our very last rule here, and this is the one that I am the most guilty of. I think you and I have spoken about this off air. I remember back, 2009, 2010, it was about 10 years ago. I was like Mr. Florida, knew everything there was to know about Florida, knew all the houses. I was like, yeah, I could buy this. And if you ever met me like at like a party or anywhere, like I'd tell you all about property investing. Never bought one, never did anything. I was just this young lad that had all this enthusiasm, but I procrastinated like all hell. It was analysis paralysis. And I think that the procrastination one, in my opinion, it was the biggest one that held me back for such a long time, but I think it also holds so many people back. I want to ask you this one a little bit differently because I think the outline of the problem is probably already established in the word. Most people understand why procrastination holds them back. Can you talk to how to overcome procrastination? What kind of things people can put in front of them to feel more comfortable with getting going and actually taking action?
I call it the nation of procrastination, which is where you surround yourself with people who all talk a good game, but no one does anything. Mm-hmm. And so it's just like hens clucking in the backyard. So there's a lot of clucking going on, but what's really happening? And why do people procrastinate? Because when you don't know what to do, you do nothing. So the way to get yourself out of procrastination is to set something that you do want to do and then start taking action towards achieving it. Really good book, Atomic Habits by James Clear, talks about how you become 37 times better at something after a year by improving 1% per day. So the way to fix your situation isn't a radical road to Damascus moment where you get converted to a new way of thinking. Just take small steps over long periods of time. Start getting a little bit better every day. And it's as simple to me as having a to-do list where you start ticking things off the to-do list. And sooner or later, you'll slowly start building momentum, and then that momentum will carry you through. But while you continue to do nothing, guess what you can expect?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Do you think that's where we go wrong then as people? Because I'm just thinking back to like childhood memories of like the Disney princesses and Snow White didn't get 1% better over the course of a year. It was like this transformation. And do you think maybe on some kind of, I'm probably getting too psychologically deep here, but on some kind of like subconscious level, we expect like a moment of transformation when we don't really realize that it is a collection of small, almost unnoticeable moments?
It's possible. In my own case, what I do is I expect unreal results from unreal input. So if I go on a diet for a day, I expect to be 5 kilos lighter that night.
Shredded.
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It's like you got to understand that it takes time for things to turn around, and then it'll take time to turn things around the other way. Like if you're not out there buying enough real estate, what are you trying to buy? Have you defined what you're looking for? Or you're looking for something that you don't know, and so it's very hard to find. And then when you start quantifying what you're looking for, I've got $60 million to place in this new fund I've got up and running. And I know what I'm looking for, but at the moment, the yields on commercial property in Australia are sitting at 5 to 6%, and I want to target 7 to 8%. Does that stop me putting offers on property? No. I'll still put in the offer because you don't know about the deal that you don't know about. And often it's not the deal that you put the offer on that you end up buying. It's some other deal that you didn't even know that existed at that point in time that you get led to.
Mm-hmm.
So the important thing is to start doing something. Action leads to reaction, leads to more action, leads to reaction, and ultimately you'll achieve momentum. And momentum is where you can do small things and expect big things to happen. But at the start, sometimes you've got to do big things and only get small things. Start that diet, lose 200 grams in the first week, and then slowly build up to the weight loss over time. The way to build big biceps, I'm told, is not by lifting heavy weights day one, but by lifting weights over time.
Yeah, and to continue that analogy, it's about tearing the fibers in the muscles so they repair and get slightly bigger. It's about pushing yourself to a limit where it is uncomfortable to then get that little bit stronger the next day.
What aren't you doing that you should be doing? And I think if we stop and ask everyone that question, they'd be like, oh, there's a couple of things there I've been meaning to do a while. Well, get busy attending to them.
I'm just writing that down right now. What aren't you doing that you should be doing? I personally find that if I ever feel frustrated, that's exactly how to get out of my frustration. This is something that I only realized in my mid-30s when it's like, I'm just annoyed, and there'll be the something. And then now my go-to is go and do that thing that I don't want to do. And it alleviates it. It seems to help.
So I run a small mentoring group.
Mm-hmm.
We had our first meeting a couple of weeks back. And what I said to them is this: would the person that you want to become act like this? And if the answer is no, how would the person you want to become act? You want to lose 10 kilos? Would the person that you want to become 10 kilos lighter eat the Big Mac? Because the more things that you don't do that the person you want to become would do, the less likely you are to be the person you want to become. If you want to be a better investor, would the person you become do nothing? No. Well, what would they do? Would they set a target of what they're looking for? Would they be out there looking at real estate, doing inspections, talking to agents, sacrificing some of their productive time to be more productive with their investing? Like what do you need to do to be the person you want to be? That's how you overcome procrastination.
You heard of the be, do, have instead of have, do, be?
Zig Ziglar, be, do, have. So Tom Ziglar, Zig's son, is a close personal friend of mine. And if anyone hasn't come across Tom Ziglar, I highly recommend his books. Born to Win is an excellent book to get a hold of.
Tom Ziglar. I didn't even know his son was a motivational speaker as well.
Different kind of motivational speaker. Tom is not as charismatic as his dad, but he's been a great friend to me over many years, and I've enjoyed catching up with him when I've been in Texas or when he's been out in Australia.
Zig Ziglar has an incredible presence. And just in case, if you've never heard of Zig Ziglar before, jump onto YouTube and start having a search, because I can guarantee you that the guy is at least going to lead you down a few rabbit holes that'll make you think in a very positive way. But as far as procrastination is concerned, I feel that Atomic Habits is a wonderful direction to point people in. Personally, I also love Charles Duhigg's The Power of Habit. Atomic Habit kind of expands on that. But that book in itself, the Power of Habit, changed my life drastically. I love that one. But I like it about, can you just repeat that saying again about, would the person you're today, or I don't have the words right in my head.
Would the person that you want to become act like this?
And I think that is probably a brilliant one to ask yourself if you're ever feeling that you might be procrastinating, because chances are the person you're wanting to become isn't a procrastinator. But Steve, look, I feel like we're getting to the end of things now. I've got the final two questions. Number one is an action step. What's an action step that if people have really listened to this, resonated with them, they can pull out their headphones and get to work straight away on?
Yeah, I would pick which of the 5 rules that we've talked about today was the one you went, yeah, okay, I need to work on that. And then ask yourself, what would the person that I want to become do as a positive step in the right direction to improve in this regard? And everyone's going to be different. But what I'd say is don't do nothing. Don't just go on to the next thing, or I'll listen to the next podcast, or allow this to be rain that just washes off you. Like, take to heart something and try and implement it to get a change, because the more you do of what you've done, the more you get of what you've got. And if you want something different, you have to do something different.
Love it. Steve McKnight, we've arrived to ultimately the most important question of the entire show. I've asked you this a while ago, but I'm going to ask you again. Steve McKnight, what is your favorite pizza?
Yes, well, the person that I want to become is someone who's about 5 kilos lighter than he is at the moment. So I'm going to say my favorite pizza is the salad that comes with it.
Oh, have you tried like a cauliflower pizza base yet? Like one of the low carb ones?
Oh, no, I haven't. Maybe I'll give that a go.
Oh, mate, they're good. A little bit of cheese in there if you go on low carb, but it all depends on how you're losing the weight. But right now, you are the first person in pizza and property history to ever answer that question, the salad that comes with the pizza.
Well, remember this, Steve McKnight, famous saying, success comes from doing things differently, all right? And that's been the hallmark of my success. I got out of accounting. I didn't want to follow what everyone else has done. I bought hundreds of properties when most people buy one or two. I started a fund when other people haven't. Success comes from doing things differently. It's been my mojo of difference, and what's made me be able to achieve financial freedom from age 32.
And if you're wanting to check out a few more details about Steve's fund as well, we'll have it linked in the show notes below. But as for now, Steve McKnight, thank you so much for jumping on the show, mate. You're always an absolute wealth of knowledge, and just love speaking with you.
Thanks, Todd. Bye-bye.